This is Kirk from Crestwood, Kentucky. The perfect time for me to listen to Scandal Water Podcast is when I'm out for a run. Being entertained while I'm running helps the miles fly by.
Welcome to Scandal Water, where the tea is hot and the conversation lively.
Your hosts, Candy
And Ashley,
will discuss a peculiar story somehow related to the entertainment industry. This podcast might not change the world, but it just might satisfy your thirst for an intriguing tale.
Oh, it's that time of day. Tune in and hear what the ladies say. It's time to bend your ear when the silver screen appears. Stories about the stage and screen and everything in between. So come on and join the fun. The curtain opens in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, Ashley.
hello.
We are back, and guess what, guys? We have a brief reprieve from the rain.
Yes, I'm
So-
thinking it's coming back, though, at some point. It's adding to the ambiance of this particular film.
Right.
Because
and
they
you
had
know
a
what?
huge scene in the rain. You remember that?
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
They did. How appropriate.
Mhm.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens. But for right now, it's a little quiet.
Yes.
And we are ready to start our second Western.
Mhm.
So I have a question for you. Only 4 Westerns have ever won an Oscar for Best Picture. I'm going to give you a hint.
Okay.
One of those is a more modern take on a Western, and the other are more traditional Westerns. Okay, so 4 total. Do you want to try to guess any of those?
Was Stagecoach one of them?
No.
No, although it's called a modern Western. Well, I know this is one of them, right?
Yes.
Unforgiven.
Unforgiven,
is one of
1992.
them. True Grit didn't win for Best Picture,
No.
no. Then I don't know. What are the others?
I've never heard of this movie. You probably have. Cimarron?
Oh, yeah.
It's 1931.
Okay.
Dances with Wolves,
Oh,
1990.
yeah, of course.
And the one that is a more modern take, No Country for Old Men, 2007.
Oh, yeah, that was Coen Brothers, right?
That was really dark.
Yeah, I did not see
Yeah.
that. Did not want to see that.
Yeah, really graphic. I think I did see it, but it's not my thing.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting because it points out that this is a genre that I think is very popular, especially some people really love it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's definitely an audience. At the same time, it is hard to win an award if this is the genre you choose to pursue. But the movie we are about to discuss,
It won all of them.
it did. I mean, this is a biggie. And this is one of those we were thinking about this theme this month. We knew we had to get John Wayne in there.
Absolutely.
And this felt like one that we also had to address. I
Yeah.
mean, this is one of the first ones
That was kind of an
people will-
anti-Western, sort
yes,
of. Yeah.
which is coming up in just a second. I'm
Yeah.
going to ask you about that. And it's also a Clint Eastwood film.
Yep.
And I mean, again, iconic. He's synonymous with this genre. How could we not do something
Absolutely.
right? So, but you brought up that point, anti-Western.
Mm-hmm.
When I was researching for the episode that's actually going to come out next week, I did them out of order.
Okay.
Is it okay if we say what it is?
Yeah.
Okay. It
that's
was
one-
Tombstone. We're doing
Yes.
Tombstone
Yes,
next week.
yes.
And I was researching for Tombstone and I ran across this video. I thought this was fascinating. This is an Old West historian named Michael Grauer. And what he does, I mean, he does all manner of things because he's an expert in this field. But in this particular video, he rates 13 Wild West scenes from movies and TV series to tell you how realistic they really are. Now, we're going to hear just a tiny clip from him. I'm going to bring him back up again and when we do the Tombstone episode. But here's just a little clip of him sharing a comment or two about the Old West.
It's the greatest myth about the West is everybody was a gunman. That's a bunch of nonsense. That's what you have here is basically a shootout, an artificial shootout between 3 outlaws. So the period of what people usually understand as the Wild West is primarily the second half of the 1800s. The only people carrying firearms were criminals and the army and also lawmen. Virtually every cow town, it was illegal to carry your firearms in town. Yes, there were firearms in the West, but not nearly as you see in Western films.
So that was very brief, but what were your thoughts about what he said?
That everybody didn't carry a gun, that you think that they did, and that is something and that you weren't allowed to carry your gun in town, which is something we're going to see
We're going to
next.
see this. Yes.
Yeah.
So when I ran across this fella, and by the way, let me say again, I will be bringing him up next week because one of the scenes that he reviewed was from the movie Tombstone.
Okay.
So it'll come up again. But I was really taken with his approach, like the fact that He has this knowledge about the way things really were. And his comments to me were fascinating because, I mean, let's face it, unless you study this time period in depth or you do a lot of reading, a lot of times you think
What Hollywood tells us is what the way it was.
Exactly. And it could not be any further from the truth. And so that brings me to your term. You called it an anti-Western. What I kept seeing was the term revisionist. Revisionist Westerns. I found this Yahoo Entertainment article entitled The Greatest Revisionist Westerns That Redefine the Genre, which was published just this past March. And it offers this definition of what a revisionist Western is. Oh, you know what? Do you want to tell me what you think a revisionist Western is before I tell you what they said?
I would assume that it goes back to, it's more historically accurate. It's not the Hollywood version of what the West was. It's an actual historical representation of what the West was.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Here's what they said.
Okay.
Sometimes referred to as anti-Western films, revisionist Westerns offer a far more accurate portrayal of the West, complete with morally ambiguous characters, realistic violence, and weightier subject matter than the simplistic Golden Age Westerns of the 1940s. In many cases, these revisionist Westerns also provide a greater focus on marginalized voices in Western stories, featuring more judicious portrayals of female characters, indigenous American culture, and individuals of various ethnic backgrounds.
Okay.
And I really appreciated that because obviously Unforgiven is considered a great revisionist Western. And having this definition in my mind going into it made me think about it a very different way.
Okay.
Do you have any other thoughts about that definition or about that definition as applied to Unforgiven?
No, I agree with you. I think it is what Unforgiven was. It is almost the opposite of what True Grit was as far as the overall theme. You know, to me, True Grit was one of the best representations of what a Western was during the 60s, 50s and 60s. Like, this is the culmination of it. And this feels like the opposite of what that was. So I think it's a good one to follow, True Grit.
Oh, good. That's a good comment. So obviously I thought, okay, this is a good one to cover. First of all, critically acclaimed. Everybody thinks of this one. It is the revisionist version, and it's what the Westerns. It's what made Clint a star, but it's where he basically goes against his own type. So, okay, so many things to think about, so many things to talk about. Let me briefly give you a little overview, and then we'll talk about some of our impressions. So this movie came out in 1992. It's a Warner Brothers film, rated R.
Appropriately so.
Yes, yes, 2 hours and 10 minutes. Written by David Webb Peoples and directed, of course, by Clint Eastwood. It is widely considered to be one of the great revisionist Westerns of all time. I mean, if you Google that, if you search that term, it's going to be on your list. It's going to come up. On IMDb's top 25, it came in as number 13. That's Hollywood Reporter. They had their top 30 list of the best revisionist Westerns of all time. They didn't number theirs. They didn't rank them, but it's there. I mean, time and time again, this movie appears. It's popular to this day. Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 96%.
That's really good.
IMDb, 8.2 out of 10. I mean, this is a popular movie. Okay, so the summary says, retired Old West gunslinger Will Money reluctantly takes on one last job to avenge an injustice with the help of his old partner and a newer outlaw known simply as the Schofield Kid.
I like the Schofield Kid.
Know. I mean, I see a connection already. He was braggadocious too.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Yes, he was.
Yeah. But, okay, this movie, beloved by a lot of people, but also, as we've said, critically acclaimed. Here is a quote from a Time magazine article about the legend of Clint Eastwood. That was the focus, but it touches on Unforgiven. It says, Unforgiven 1992, Eastwood's first Western since Pale Rider in 1985, is a dark, passionate drama with good guys so twisted and bad guys so persuasive that virtue and villainy become two views of the same soul. But it is also Eastwood's meditation on the burdens of age, repute, courage, heroism, on quintessence. The movie takes its time letting you watch the aging gunfighter, Will Money, turn into Clint. And when he does, it's not thrilling, but scary.
Yeah.
At the end, he threatens to, quote, come back and kill everyone. Will says says he's doing it all for the money, but it's really because a man's job is his life. Will shoots people. Clint shoots Westerns. And for once, the Hollywood establishment took notice, awarding the film Oscars for Best Picture and Best Director, and the Renegade star an Oscar nomination as Best Actor. After nearly 40 years in the movie business, these were his first ever Academy Award citations.
Isn't that something? These people, and I think part of it is because they make it look so easy that they don't realize how hard it really is. Like with John Wayne and Clint Eastwood, has Clint won Best Actor ever? That's not something that I know.
I didn't look that up.
Well, regardless, this was his first, like they said, his first
Right.
nominations ever. And totally off topic, but people like Tom Cruise and Cary Grant never won an Oscar. And you go, what? These are the actors of our time, and they've never been awarded for what they've done for the cinema. But I think they just make it look so easy that you don't realize how hard it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a side comment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm driving this point home, but Unforgiven is talked about so much. Like, people will say that either this movie or $1 Million Baby are the best things that Clint has ever
done.
directed. Like, these get held up time and time again as his best work, which is interesting because I don't believe either of us love it the way that
The
some other
fans do.
people do.
Yeah.
Tell me, first of all, what is your background with the movie, and then we'll share some of our impressions.
I have seen bits and pieces of it over the years because Brian really had enjoyed it and he likes watching clips from it. Sometimes I judge a film based on how I feel at the end of it when the credits are rolling. And I remember feeling when the credits rolled on this one, wow, that was bleak, which was the point of it. I understand that is the point and that's what he wanted, but that's not. You didn't
love it.
I didn't love it, you know, and I guess part of it came from being a person who grew up with those classic Westerns who had the feel good feelings at the end of it, that I just felt like, well, that's not really the emotion I was going for. I understand your point, and I think it's an important film. Would I go back and watch it a bunch? Probably not. You know, it's important, but was it fun? Not really.
Right.
I think for me, the standout and the reason I would go back to watch it again would be Gene Hackman's performance in this, which was electric and terrifying to me.
Oh yeah, he was. So I hated him as a character.
Oh yeah.
As a character. Interestingly enough, when I told Kirk I was going to do an episode on Unforgiven, he was absolutely shocked because there's a little backstory to this.
Oh yeah.
Yes. I don't know. Kirk and I have been together forever. Do you know that we dated in high school?
I think you told me that.
Oh
yes.
yeah, so many different memories I have with him. But anyway, we saw Unforgiven together, and Sherry actually came with us. And now remember,
The first time you talking about when it first came out?
The
Okay.
very first time. And remember that this is not my chosen genre,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
Westerns are not my thing. We had gone because Kirk really wanted to see it.
Yeah.
And we got into a little bit of a scrap when it was over
you?
because Sherry and I really, really, really did not like the portrayal of women and some of the themes and he, it wasn't fair, right? Because he was already, like, a lot of people love this movie. He came out loving it. He became irritated because we were giving some criticism.
Yeah.
We became irritated because he kept defending.
Yeah.
And neither one of us were right or wrong. Like,
Yeah.
but it turned into this goofy, stupid little scrap to the point to where over the past however many years, it's been a joke to
That you
where,
won't
like,
watch it?
or like if anybody gets in a scrap, it'll be like, oh, Unforgiven, you know. I mean, like, it was a
It's a
thing.
thing, okay.
It was a thing. So he was surprised that I was doing it, because I had no good memories of this movie. None. I am absolutely thrilled that we did this, because having to analyze it and having to do the research and to think about it from a different lens has actually made me look at and appreciate things that I would never ever have been able to say about this movie, because it was not my movie.
Good. And something
first
good
watch.
did come out of this.
Yes. So, what are some of our impressions? And I'm going to give my impressions from my rewatch version, not my original. Okay. So, let's just share a few of the thoughts.
So one thing that I got the impression of in the women who hired the gunman, whoever was going to show up, the woman that the stabbing happened to, I felt like this was her trauma. And then I felt like Strawberry Alice, is that her name? Frances Fisher's character. It almost felt like she took over that trauma for her and made it more of her thing, because then she became the driving force. And I didn't feel like the girl who got attacked had much agency in what she wanted to happen, because when the nice one came back, who did didn't do anything to her. Brian pointed out to me, he's like, there's only one that really, there was one brother or something that hurt the girl. The other brother didn't.
He held her.
Oh, he did.
He held her while that man sliced her up.
I don't think we saw that.
I went back and because I said the same thing. I was like, did he do anything wrong? And he said, and Kirk said he held her. And I went back and looked.
Okay, I'll have to tell Brian.
I'm pretty sure that's what I saw.
Okay, because Brian was like, he wasn't even there. Like, he didn't do anything. So I'll have to tell him that. But when we were thinking that he had not done anything, he came back because he was sorry and brought her the horse. It seemed like the girl wanted that horse. And then Strawberry Alice was like, we don't need that horse. And it's like, well, that was her decision. Did she want it or did she not? And I don't know. I just felt like her experience got taken away from her and taken over by this other lady.
Oh, goodness. I've got so much going through my head. Can I say something else and then wrap back to that?
Sure.
Okay. One of the things that I did not notice on my first watch, but that I appreciated on my second watch was Will Money, Clint Eastwood's character, was the single only person in this movie who had an ounce of respect for women. His wife redeemed him. Like in turn, he gives her credit from the very beginning to turning him into a decent human being, that if it hadn't been for her, he didn't know who he would be or what he'd be doing.
Yeah.
He's loyal to his wife, credits her. He's respectful to the girl who was cut. Her name is Delilah.
I really liked their scene.
He's so kind to her, so respectful. And I saw Clint Eastwood give an interview where he was asked about the fact that his movies have a feministic thread running through them. So like that was one of the things that I loved about him, was only person who valued women at all. In the entire film, the only women who were represented, other than his children who you see in just a split second, his daughter.
Yeah. It's like, bye kids, be back in 2 weeks. Hope you're still alive when I get home.
But other than his child, I mean, really every other woman was somebody who worked at the brothel.
Yeah.
And they were literally treated as property.
Yep.
And disrespected and devalued. And
Morgan Freeman's wife.
Oh gosh, the way he treated her.
Yeah, terrible.
Oh, terrible. So I saw something, I agree with you. I noticed that Delilah seemed like she wanted to forgive and go with things. I saw Strawberry Alice as kind of in a way like the Maddie of the previous movie. She was the one who had enough nerve to stand up to Gene Hackman's character. Nobody else would stand up to him. This woman with no power was the only one who tried to argue. She's the only one who stood up for them as women, as being treated as property, as chattel, and who wanted justice. And she's like, if nobody else will give us justice, I will have the agency to try to make it happen. Now, did she do it correctly the entire time? No. But at the same time, I respected that at least she was standing up for the women.
Trying.
That at least somebody was standing up for these women.
Yeah, I just wish that Delilah had a little more like, I want this to happen.
Right.
It just seemed like her trauma got taken from her.
Yes, I do.
I see why Strawberry Alice did it, but that was a little bit like, well, she didn't even get to keep her own trauma.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I totally respect your point. I think it's very valid. I just saw why Strawberry Alice did what she did. Yeah. Gene Hackman's character, it was interesting. Like, he was so bad, but then he would, he had the dream, he'd work on the house, there'd be a little humor, but I thought he was evil.
He was terrifying.
Yeah.
I saw some kind of review that talked about how while everyone agrees that Gene Hackman's character was evil, they said, well, what what was he supposed to do in this circumstance? He had to have this hard line of no guns and treat people this way because you have absolute lawlessness, and if you're not this firm person, then it is going to get out of control, but while still saying, but he was still evil. It was still awful, but they thought they could understand maybe his earliest motivations that got twisted along the way. Like, you have to be firm with outlaws, but he took it.
Well, and I agree with you. And actually, in one of the interviews, Clint Eastwood kind of said the same thing. But at the same time, okay, I'm invested in this. I felt so appalled by how these women were treated.
Yeah.
Like, I really am very, very tied up in that. If your thing is that outlaws have to pay, then how much more telling is it that these two outlaws who came into this establishment and broke every rule and literally cut someone up and probably would have killed her or done worse had they not been stopped, that was just totally dismissed because it was easier to let them go and, hey, just give a couple of ponies.
Yeah.
That's all we need.
Yeah.
I do not respect him.
Well, the part that made him evil is that he took pleasure also in hurting people. Like the kicking.
What he did to Ned.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Is that Morgan's character?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. What he did to him and what he did to the Richard Harris character. He was an old man.
Yeah.
And he made an example out of this old man.
He was sadistic.
Yes, sadistic.
He was sadistic. Yes. I was not sorry to see him go. Okay, so I guess one last comment I'll make before because we'll talk more as we go through. But in terms of the revisionist aspect of it, Clint Eastwood was vulnerable. Like, he couldn't get on the horse.
Yeah, the pigs, he fell in the slop.
Yes, he admitted he was scared of dying. That from their perspective, him as a director, actor, and the screenwriter, they said that they thought that was a really big scene, in terms of normal Westerns versus this, where he's very vulnerable and admitting he's scared to die. That was big. And then when he comes back, I love that line when he's talking to the Schofield kid, killing a man's a terrible thing.
Yeah.
Or terrible thing, killing a man.
Yeah.
I was like, oh.
It is.
Oh, powerful. Powerful. Can I say one last thing?
Of course
Sorry.
you can.
Unforgiven.
The title.
I loved it.
Yeah.
When on the rewatch, I'm like, it happened because these women couldn't forgive. It happened. He couldn't forgive himself. His family couldn't forgive him. He couldn't forgive what they did to Ned. Like, everything was just this domino.
Nobody forgives anybody.
Yes, and what an awful thing it was every time somebody, like, it would just get elevated to the next step. I was like, that's a great title for this movie.
It really was. It was a perfect title. I'm going to pop back to Claudia for a second, Clint's wife, William Money's wife. He kind of used Claudia as his god, like his driving force, because he wouldn't say like a higher power or God wouldn't like me doing this. It was always Claudia wouldn't like me doing this, even though she is long since passed. He is still using her opinion
like as the measuring stick.
As the measuring stick about what he should do.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting take.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to say it, since women were so disrespected in this movie, I'm like, good. You actually respected your wife. You saw what she did for you. And her moral character, her moral compass was more probably biblical.
Sure.
Or,
yeah. Most likely. Yeah. In that time period.
And that this is how he knew to connect to what was right, was through her.
Through her.
Well, it's super interesting how this movie came to be. I learned so much. Let me go ahead and give a shout out to a great source. I found this article entitled Unforgiven Screenwriter Describes the Lost Ending Clint Eastwood Cut from Classic 1992 Western. Sounds like it would be all about the ending. It actually ends up being this lovely interview with this screenwriter, which talks about all kinds of behind-the-scenes stories. By the way, it was written by Ethan Alter. Really, really good. David Webb Peoples was the screenwriter. He shared so much. I'm going to sprinkle a couple different stories throughout this episode, but let's start by giving you the background. He shared that back in the 1970s, he was trying to write some screenplays, and one thing he had decided not to do was have people die in his movies. He said he had noticed that death scenes were always very unrealistic. He didn't like them. He said, I'm just going to do comedies or lighter things. What changed his mind was watching the movie Taxi Driver and reading the book, Connection, The Shootist.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
He said that both of those felt more real and raw, even poignant. And so those two works, plus this Western he'd seen many years before called The Gunfighter, were some of his primary influences. So he wrote The William Money Killings, which was the title, in 1976, and Clint Eastwood acquired the rights in the early 80s, but he held off on making the movie for years.
He was waiting for himself to age into the part, right?
Yes. In fact, we're going to hear him talk about that in just a second. But by the time the movie did go before the cameras in the fall of 1991, he had, of course, changed the title. So this is a little clip from Our American Stories with Lee Habib, and it's, of course, Clint talking about Unforgiven.
I said, well, what's the deal on it? So he told me the deal. I said, I'll take that deal. My plan was that somewhere, I just felt that the guy needed a little bit more age on him than it was at that particular time. In 1991, I brought it out and dusted it off and started the prep on it. I felt maybe it was a kind of a risky project, but I said I loved it and I wanted to do it. And that's all that those last two sentences are the key for my...
You said I felt elements of myself in Will Money. what elements of yourself?
The presentation of him is so anti-Western. He's a pig farmer out there with his kids, and the ruffians are all scruffy looking.
Mm-hmm.
He's scruffy looking, and he's destitute.
Can't get on his horse?
Yeah, and the guy comes along and talks him into his reputation, the past of being a renegade. He talked him into sort of coming back out of it. And he's in desperation. He decides to do it. And of course, he starts to mount his horse. He hasn't ridden in a while. He can't get on it. And I thought, that's interesting. Why would a guy write that? I mean, what goes into a writer's imagination that you would think of that approach to the Western hero?
So just to clarify where I found that clip, it was a site called Our American Stories with Lee Habib, but obviously he was being interviewed by James Lipton.
Yes.
Yes. So what are your thoughts about what he said?
I thought it was interesting too, because that scene felt like odd, but I think it was supposed to show us he's so far out of his previous life that he can't even get back on his horse. And to show us how low he was. He's literally falling into the mud, the pig farmer mud. He has no handle on his life, which is why he agrees to take this job. He needs the money. The pigs all have the fever because the kids keep going, I think this pig has the fever. I think that pig has the fever. So his livelihood is getting ready to end as well.
Yes. And it's interesting because I thought the same thing. When I was watching it, I was like, goodness, he's just going to leave these young children. And I think he tells the boy, like, you're in charge, you know, keep everything
You're
going.
probably
basically.
8 and she's 6.
Yeah. And I think he might have made some reference to go over to Ned's wife if you need something or if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
But I think, I guess my interpretation is we were going for the really gritty realism. And is this what it would have been like? I mean, who would you have left the kids with if you were a single dad in your early 60s with 2 young children? Like, what do you do? And I guess that's what
you do.
That's what he did. Well, we haven't even really gotten into the cast yet or the movie itself, but we've laid quite a foundation. Why don't we go ahead and take a little break?
Okay.
And when we come back, we will jump into the cast.
We love including listener voices in our episodes, and we're always looking for more. So tell us, where do you sip your scandal water? Do you catch up on the tea while folding your laundry, sitting at your work desk, working out at the gym? Let us know by sending in your shout out, telling us your first name, your hometown, and where you are or what you're doing when you're listening to Scandal Water. And you just might hear a voice you recognize starting one of our upcoming episodes. Email your audio clip to scandalwaterpodcast@gmail.com. The voice memo app on your phone will work just fine. Cheers!
And we are back. So we've already said quite a bit about Clint Eastwood in that lead role of Will Money, which was such an interesting role for him to take on. He's very open and vulnerable about the fact that he used to be a terrible person, and it was his wife who set him straight, as we've already mentioned. Something that I thought was interesting was, we've alluded to this too, but whereas in traditional Westerns, a lot of time killing is glamorized, you know, like even if you were to ask a lot of people, what's the big scene in Unforgiven? A lot of people will say it's when Clint comes in and he gets his revenge, you know, like the big shootout where he is kind of the typical heroic Clint part, right? But the screenwriter goes back to the part we were just talking about where the parts where he's vulnerable, the part where he almost dies, the conversation with the Schofield kid, you know, those are the places where they show the physical and emotional pain that actually comes with death.
Yes.
In that same article I referenced before, that Yahoo article, it had this quote: deconstructing the mythos around gunslingers, Unforgiven looks at the unglamorous side of Western violence, where shootouts don't end with exciting quick draws, but in painful, slow deaths. And they point to that famous line Will says when he tells the Schofield kid, it's a hell of a thing killing a man. Take away all he's got and all he's ever gonna have.
Yes, I thought that too. I think I even made a note about that. I don't know where it is on here. It was gruesome when they killed who I thought was the nice brother. Obviously, I didn't remember if he did hold her down.
Yeah, or the friend. I'm
the
not sure
friend,
if they were brothers,
whatever the connection was, but they're waiting for him to die, and it's gruesome and sad and awful, and it just
Well, the killing that the Schofield kid did in the outhouse. Like, it was just so. There was something. How do I put this? It's like it's the idea of death and him losing his life is so profound and in such a humiliating and
way
and normal normal everyday way to
and
do
the
that.
kids thinking like he's never gonna breathe again. He's never. And I took that from him, and it really affects him.
Oh,
which
yeah.
I had figured that he was all bravado and that he had never killed anybody before, because I told Brian when it happened, I said that was his first person he probably ever killed, and it affected him. He didn't want any more to do with it. It cured him of that. He had those rose-colored glasses, like the gunslinger way is the way he wanted to be, and he even says to Clint Eastwood, "I'm not like you." It bothers me.
No. And again, just to kind of give him credit, I think Clint Eastwood does a good job, I think, of kind of showing both parts of himself. You know, when he comes back and he is the outlaw, he nails it. But when he's having those scenes, like with the Schofield kid in that moment, you see him as somebody who does have a moral compass now, somebody who he's empathetic to this kid, and he's actually encouraging him, like, don't do it anymore. And I'm not going to hurt you. You're the only friend I have. Yeah. So Clint did a great job. Obviously, Gene Hackman. Now, we haven't talked about Gene much, I think, since his passing. So just to quickly talk about him a bit.
Which is what I thought about as I was watching this. I couldn't help but think what a sad and tragic end Gene Hackman himself came to as I was watching this.
Yeah. Well, again, just to reiterate, he played Sheriff Little Bill Daggett, who seemed most concerned about keeping law and order in his small town and also finishing his dream house. Those were his two priorities in life. But in real life, Gene Hackman died just this past February. You guys all remember it was very tragic. Both Gene and his wife were found dead in their home along with one of their pet dogs. And it was later determined that Gene's wife, Betsy Arakawa Hackman, had died first due to a rare rodent-borne disease called hantavirus, pulmonary syndrome. And then Gene, who was suffering from advanced Alzheimer's and other health issues like heart problems, he died about a week later, they've determined. And of course, and then he wasn't found for a while either. They were, found after they'd both been passed for a while. Two of the dogs were found alive and roaming the property, but one dog that had been crated had passed, probably due to dehydration and starvation. And the medical experts speculated that poor Gene might not have even realized his wife had passed, and of course wouldn't have realized that the dog was trapped. It's just all tragic, so tragic. But at the Oscar ceremony in March, Morgan Freeman gave a brief speech in honor of his friend Gene, and I thought we would listen to what he said.
Good.
Well, this week our community lost a giant, and I lost a dear friend, Gene Hackman. I had the pleasure of working alongside Gene on two films.
That's what I thought.
Unforgiven and Under Suspicion. And like everyone who's ever shared a scene with him, I learned he was a generous performer and a man whose gifts elevated everyone's work. He received 2 Oscars, but more importantly, he won the hearts of film lovers all over the world. Gene always said, "I don't think about legacy. I just hope people remember me as someone who tried to do good work." So I think I speak for us all when I say, Gene, you'll be remembered for that and for so much more. Rest in peace, my friend.
Ooh.
That was really beautiful.
It was a really nice tribute.
So I don't know if you have this, but I have 2 undocumented, just in my brain, pieces of trivia that I found after I read this. Are you going to talk about Saul Rubinek's
quote about Gene? Oh, no, you go ahead.
Okay, well, after Gene passed away, he put out something that said the very famous scene, the duck, instead of the Duke, the duck scene, that Clint Eastwood was known for filming rehearsals. And the scene that is in the film was the rehearsal. It was the first take and the rehearsal. And he said, you can see the script in the scene. But he said it was just magnetic and electric. And he just ended up using that version. The other thing that I read is that Gene Hackman took the part because Clint assured him that he would not glorify gun violence, because Gene was worried about, like, I don't want this to look like we're going to be glorifying gun violence. And he said, no, we're not going to show, there's not going to be a lot of, I think he didn't want there to be a lot of blood and gore and all that. And he promised him that he would not do that.
Yeah, I have notes about that.
Okay, good.
Yes. Clint talked about this in an interview. He said Gene was very reluctant to do the film, and part of it was because he had young kids at the time, and that was part of why he was kind of anti-violence. And Clint said that he convinced him to do it not only, I'm sure what you said definitely was in there, but he also told him that this character of Little Bill was not a typical black-hatted villain. That's how he referred to it. His take on it was that Little Bill also had redeeming qualities, such as, he made a joke, he said, such as his very strong beliefs about gun control, especially if he was the one controlling the guns. Yes. And making sure that things ran smoothly and legally in his town. He also said that it was important that he had dreams. So here is a quote from him. This is from that same interview, I believe. He didn't wear the usual costume of a bad guy. He was a sheriff who had noble ideas. He had this small town and he ran it with a lot of strength. What I liked about the character is he had dreams. He was building a house and he wanted to sit on the porch and smoke his pipe and watch the sunsets. He had dreams like everyone else does, and he didn't see himself as a heavy. He didn't see himself as a bad guy. He thought he was always doing this on the side of right.
Right, and that's what makes a good villain, is they are the hero of their own story.
Yeah, and he went on to say that it's actually what made him so disturbing and dangerous. Yeah, but Gene took the role. He convinced him, which ended up being very violent, I thought.
Yeah, I was like, Clint, were you telling him the full truth when you said that? Because it was super violent.
Yeah.
And I read that he really was kicking those people because you couldn't fake it. They had them put on padding. So the people who were getting kicked had on padding,
But they were getting kicked?
But they were getting kicked.
Oh my goodness. Well, he nailed it.
He did.
I
My shoulders were up around my ears in that the duck scene. And when he tells Kim to, like, I was afraid he was going to kill the writer. I really was. I thought he was going to do it. Who was a true crime writer in the Western world. I was like, dude, you'd fit in now. Not so much then, but you'd really fit in now.
Yeah, I thought he was going to die too, to be honest. But again, we've already said this. Gene won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for that role. And that brings us to another amazing actor who we just heard from, Morgan Freeman. Morgan played Ned Logan, Will's former partner, who had, at the point that the film starts, he had settled into this quiet life. He was a husband, he was a farmer, much like Will himself. But he agrees to go with Will on this one last job, and it ends up costing him.
Yeah, it does.
Morgan Freeman's character, I'm just editorial comment for just a second. There was no black or white. Yeah, I loved Clint Eastwood's comment in the interview where he kept talking about white-hatted heroes, black-hatted villains, because nothing was black and white in this movie. Not a single thing. Because on the one hand, Ned Logan as Will's partner, you loved him. The way he treated his wife, I was like,
appalled.
Oh, you are not a good man.
You're not a good husband. You are not a good husband. You might be a good friend, but you are not a good husband.
Right. And so it was interesting how everything seemed to be shades of gray.
Yeah.
Everything in this movie. But this actually marked the first time that Morgan Freeman and Clint Eastwood worked together. Morgan Freeman said in an interview on the Oprah Winfrey Network that when he and Kevin Costner were working on Robin Hood, Kevin Costner had mentioned, hey, there's this great script floating around called The Will Money Killings, and you should try to get in that. So Morgan Freeman said 18 months went by, and then his agent called him one day to say that Clint Eastwood had this role he might be interested in, and he was like ready to accept. He went on to say that he found working with Clint Eastwood to be very natural and easy.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, he said it was like they had been working together forever, and he shared all these other positive notes about films. I think he called it a quiet love affair working with Clint. Yes. In fact, Morgan Freeman said in one interview that of all the directors he's worked with, Clint Eastwood is his favorite.
Wow.
It's a pretty big compliment.
That is a big compliment. It also makes me think the other directors are like, oh.
Thanks, Morgan. Yeah, appreciate it.
I thought we were friends. That would be me watching it like, oh, he's going to save me. Nope, it was Clint Eastwood.
Man.
Okay. Sorry.
Frances Fisher was in a relationship with Clint Eastwood at the time that she was in the movie.
That's how you know who Clint is dating, is whoever the lead woman is. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. Like, who is his lead woman? He's probably dating her.
I found out a lot about his background that I did not know. Yeah. So a Collider article described Frances Fisher's character, Strawberry Alice, as, quote, the no-nonsense Strawberry Alice, who is almost a surrogate mother to the working women in the town and the ringleader for raising the reward. Compared to the rest of the townspeople, Alice isn't swayed by Daggett's terror and is essentially the only one who has the nerve to stand up to the frightening, corrupt lawman. Fisher is simply sublime as Alice, and unlike other female characters in popular westerns, depicts an independent and strong strong-willed character who is without a doubt one of the movie's most admirable. I like that quote because
It was a good quote. Yeah.
it made me see her
In a different light.
Yeah. Richard Harris
Oh,
played
good, yes.
English Bob. And I know you have some things you want to add here.
Well, I didn't recognize him, and Brian's like, you know who that is? And he said, that's who was in The Lion in Winter with Katharine Hepburn. Like, he's a huge English actor,
yeah.
very well known. And he's the one that had the idea to make his character like this big, pompous, British, upper crust guy. But then when he's leaving the town later, he reverts to his true self, which is Cockney, and he's shouting at them. And he came to Clint Eastwood and said, this is how I'd like to play it. And Clint Eastwood said, I love it, do it.
Yeah.
So that was his idea to bring that
Very
to his
cool.
character.
Very cool. Several times, several different interviews, Clint told an amusing story about Richard. He said that he knew he wanted Richard to play that role, and he called him personally to offer the job.
Oh.
Well, a woman answered the phone. I'm assuming it was probably somebody who maybe worked in the household. But when she went to go get Richard for the phone, it just so happened he was actually in his TV room watching High Plains Drifter.
Oh.
So he hears, Clint Eastwood's on the phone. He thinks it's a prank.
Oh, no.
And when he goes to the phone and he's like,
Sure.
okay, who is this? Bob, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Clint tells the story. He thought it was so funny, but yeah, he thought it was a prank.
That's funny.
Yeah. And you brought up Saul. He played the writer, W.W.
I liked the
Beauchamp.
writer.
Yeah. How do you say that last name?
I have no idea. Beauchamp sounds good to me, but I thought he was so funny. I'm going to, before you delve into the writer, just to say, there was one character that I don't know what his name was, but he was my favorite teeny tiny role. Just, it's like my guy in The Fugitive that goes, I'll call the press, no press, no press. You know, that where it was just the perfect delivery. It was the man, it was one of the sheriff deputies or whatever. He's asking if you'd rather be shot when you were hot or cold. It was just my favorite minor character delivery. It was just like, that's perfect. And then he ends up dying in the end. I was like, oh, sorry, there went my guy. He was he was the chunky little sheriff that was protecting the bad guy, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the writer.
As an actor, he was probably like, I get a death scene.
Yeah, he probably was. I'm in a Clint Eastwood movie.
Well, as for Saul, I only have one little anecdote. In an interview, he told the story of sending in his tape in order to audition for the role.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought this was interesting. It's a little behind the scenes look at Clint Eastwood's approach, I guess. He said, Saul did, that at Jack Nicholson's advice, he did more than what was required. He had been told, send in a tape that shows this. And Jack Nicholson had said, no, you do more than that. Give them more than they asked for. If they said one scene, you give them two or whatever.
Interesting.
And so he said he did more and he got cast right away. And so when Saul finally met Clint Eastwood in person, he said, hey, what made you cast me? And Clint told him it was because his tape stood out. And then he went ahead and he asked Clint, why do you have everybody audition via tapes instead of just having the actors come in and do it in person?
I would say so you see what they look like on film. But what did he say?
He said it was because if he met the actors in person, he wouldn't be able to say no.
Oh.
Isn't that interesting? Clint Eastwood with his persona of being the tough guy was like, I wouldn't be able to turn you down.
I feel you, Clint.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I thought that was kind of sweet.
It is. But he did talk about in that scene he said you had these two acting giants, Richard Harris on one side and Gene Hackman. He said they forced you to bring your A game.
Oh, I bet they did.
Whew.
Wow. So the Schofield kid was played by James Woolvett, who was very young at the time. Remember, he's the big talking, braggy kid.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of sad because he was like, this is it. This is my breakout role. And then it took a while for the movie to come out.
Yeah.
And, and he didn't take off the way he thought he would.
Yeah, I think I read that he had accepted something in another country. So by the time it was hitting and was hot, he was already committed to something and couldn't take some of the stuff that was being offered to him.
So it didn't go the way he hoped.
I thought it was a really cool character choice to make him nearsighted.
Yes. And probably, like in today's world, you'd be able to fix it. But in the reality of where they were at that time,
He couldn't fix it.
And just to mention her name, Delilah Fitzgerald, the woman who was cut, was played by Anna Thompson.
She did a good job.
She did. So the setting, the movie was filmed in Canada, and according to a Mental Floss article, Clint Eastwood's production designer, Henry Bumstead, and his team built the main set for the 1880s town of Big Whiskey, Wyoming, on a lonesome prairie in Alberta, from which no signs of modern civilization could be seen in any direction. So they wanted this really isolated area. For authenticity, all of the buildings were fully functional and expensive.
Ooh.
Yep. not just facades. And I think, oh yes, here it is in my notes. No cars were allowed on set. They didn't want anything to accidentally break the
That's cool.
realism. Yeah, the illusion. And just a little side note, Clint Eastwood helped write the music. Did you know he was a musician?
I saw that. I did not know that. I saw that he helped with the music. I'm going to go back to your set though for just a second.
Yeah.
I saw that the rain was all manufactured, but the snow was by accident. Like it snowed.
how
So the scene
cool.
between him and Delilah where there's snow on the ground, that was something, it snowed. And so they just used it. But the rain was all them.
Nice.
Which of course the rain made us liars. We said it's going to rain during this episode. It's going to be
it'll
so
set the mood.
Yeah. And it's like, no, we won't.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Yeah.
The ending, this part was fascinating to me because did you have any thoughts? Do you remember as you were watching the movie, did you have any thoughts about the ending and what you expected to happen?
Yeah, I made a note. He just up and killed Little Bill. Not much fanfare. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the big shootout that I thought they were going to have a showdown and that it was going to, it happened very fast, a lot faster than I thought it would. I thought they were going to have a monologue, there'd be a big exchange between the two of them. And nope, but again, that goes with his anti-Western.
right.
He just
Matter
went
of
in
fact.
and killed him. He just showed up. I mean, Little Bill's doing this big speech about, we're going to go out tomorrow. And he just walks in and kills him.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Little Bill says something to the effect of, I deserve more than this, or
Yeah.
I don't deserve this or something.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. In terms of the ending, there was an interesting story I ran across about the very, very end of the movie. And this got me. So I'm going to share this with you. I thought this was fascinating. So again, that interview with the screenwriter, he said that Clint was not one of those directors who would have you revamp the entire script, or rewrite a lot of things. Most of, or a lot of the original screenplay made it onto the screen just the way it was written, but one significant change was related to the ending.
Okay.
Quote, after taking care of his bloody business in the town of Big Whiskey, the screenplay ends with Money returning to his Kansas homestead where he has a tender reunion with his children, calling his daughter a lady and gently praising his son for taking care of the farm. But a tension underlies that tenderness as he keeps the truth of his journey hidden from both children. I guess you didn't kill nobody then, Will Jr. remarks to his father after Money declines to explain the exact reason for their sudden financial windfall. Nah, son, I didn't kill nobody. The killer lies through gritted teeth. That's the way it would have been in the script.
Okay, because I thought, well, that's not what happened.
That is not what happened. He said, the screenwriter, David Peoples, that he modeled the scene he wrote after the ending of The Godfather, where Al Pacino's character, Michael, lies to Diane Keaton's character about his involvement in the killings that resulted in his rise to power. David Peoples pointed out that the scene helped establish that, had it stayed in the movie, this would have helped establish that these were not triumphant killings to Will. He was actually ashamed of what he'd done.
Yeah.
He wasn't going to tell his kids about it, right? But David goes on to explain that Clint invited him to a screening of the movie while it was still in the editing process, and Clint had filmed that final scene just the way David wrote it, and then tells him after they've watched it, it's going to be cut. And David said, quote, he said he thought that it was a beat too many and he wasn't going to use it. He had this sense that the movie had already ended and sticking on another scene wasn't going to help. As the sensitive writer, I wish somehow it could have made it in, but he got the rhythm right. He has a brilliant sense of drama. According to that article, the ending that was filmed, the one that was originally written, has never been released.
Interesting.
So to this day, David is one of the few people who's ever seen it. But not only did his original ending not make it into the script, remember, Clint doesn't have you do a lot of rewrites. Clint actually did ask him to do
rewrite?
a 2-page rewrite that he filmed related to the ending and then also did not use.
What?
Yes. And this was the part I kept expecting.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, are they setting up a romance for Delilah and Clint's character,
Oh,
Will
yeah,
Money?
for her to come home with him and take care of the kids.
Yes, I kept thinking,
Yeah.
is this where we're going with
Yeah.
this? And then it didn't.
Yeah.
But the rewrite that he was asked to do would have had Delilah, the girl whose face was cut, show up at the very end of the movie. David said this about the rewrite. I thought that wasn't a great idea, but I wasn't going to argue with Clint Eastwood.
Right.
I wrote it, and I was surprised that it worked better than I thought it would. It wasn't the stupid, sentimental Hollywood ending that I expected, but it was also better without it. So Clint he filmed
Did he
it.
film? He did film it.
He filmed it and then
Wow.
decided
Nope.
not to do it. What are your thoughts about?
That would have been interesting because like we said before, he was the first person that had respected her. And it would have helped in as far as the time period. He didn't love her, but it would have been a nice companionship. It would have helped her out. It would have helped him out. It could have been a good partnership, but obviously he didn't want it to happen. I guess it was more of they were just passing in the night.
Yeah, it would have been the feel-good, happy ending that you kind of expect sometimes.
Yeah,
because
she did smile. That's the only time her character smiled is at the end. Delilah smiles when justice has been taken care of for her. She's finally happy. So that would have been interesting.
It would have been interesting, and it's funny because I kind of thought it through myself, and then I was like, but would it have taken away from his loyalty to
his wife?
Claudia?
Yeah.
Would it have taken away from, kind of the bigger picture? And in the end, I kind of thought maybe Clint went the right way.
Yeah.
Armchair Psychologist.
Well, that brings us to the armchair. So I found a quote that I thought I would read to you and then get your reaction. This, of course, connects to the ideas we've been talking about this entire time. All right, here it is. This is actually from a Forbes article. The film is acclaimed for its gritty realism, its engaging and troublesome characters, and its deconstruction of Western mythology. Eastwood's portrayal of the aging outlaw and Hackman's Oscar-winning performance as the ruthless sheriff creates such a unique tension for the aging cowboy trope prevalent in many Westerns. Unforgiven had a profound impact on the genre as it challenged traditional notions of heroism and justice that have long been a crucial component of Eastwood's career. It remains a fascinating movie that only gets better with age. What are your thoughts?
I agree with all of it. I just wish I felt better when it
Right,
ended.
right.
I do. I see all of it and I appreciate it as an intellectual. But my just viewer's heart just wanted that not happier ending, but just didn't even have to be a happy ending. It just needed to, I don't know how to describe it. Just the ending of it felt like, whoa.
Yeah,
which
it was so
the,
dark.
It was so dark.
bleak,
And that was
yeah.
the point. And I understand it was the point. He was trying to expose real life and I respect him for it. I just wish that I had been more of his target audience. I agree with it. It's important. It was still bleak.
Yes. And you know what this makes me think? And maybe this would be a future episode or a future mini-sode. It would almost be fun to bring in one rabid fan or a couple of big fans because I mean, we both admitted, like, neither of us really were fans of this on our first watch. And what has made this so fascinating for me is being able to take kind of the movie critic, the analytical view of it, because it's still not my kind of movie, right? So it would be interesting to ask, like, one of the big fans.
And I'm sure there is someone listening to this that going, you ladies are crazy.
Yes,
I can tell
I'm
you
sure.
exactly why this is
Right.
fantastic. Please do. I want to. I want to love it.
Absolutely, because I can imagine it could be anything from, oh my goodness, when Clint Eastwood finally turns into like the Clint character and it's just so satisfying when he comes in and the big shootout
Yeah,
happens.
that's what Brian actually says. He's like, now he's becoming Clint Eastwood when he takes that drink because he's sworn off alcohol the whole time. But when his friend is killed and he does that, he's like, now you're going to see it. Now you're going to see it.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, no telling what things other people would point to. I would love to hear. I would love to hear. I would just say for myself that I have much more appreciation for the film than I
Started with,
and it has been very interesting to really dig into it this way. So,
well, wait. Did Kirk get an apology is what I want to know.
oh no. Not an apology, because we didn't do anything wrong.
No, I mean, from where you saw it the first time when you were fussing, because he was like, this is great. You're like, this is crap, or whatever you said. Did you get I'm sorry. It's better than I thought.
I have acknowledged to him.
Okay, good.
Yes. I wouldn't call it an apology. I would say I have definitely, we've had open conversations where I have, I've actually been a little bit excited about some things, going, oh, did you know that the ending would have been this or whatever. And so I have said to him, I'm really glad I did this. I understand much better now. And yes.
See, there's the feel-good ending we're all looking for.
Right. Okay. There we go. So who do you want to?
Who do you think? It's Clint. He took this on. He waited for himself to age into it, which is real. Like, wow, that's a lot of faith in yourself. I'm going to age into this part and it's going to be amazing. And it was. So, and he did the music and the directing and acting. Well done, Clint.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cheers to you.
Cheers.
If you love what we do, please rate and review our show or become a supporter through Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon. Whether a single gift or recurring monthly donation, your support is what allows us to keep the tea brewing.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast app or the Scandal Water Podcast YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Show notes are available at our website, scandalwaterpodcast.com, where you can also access the merch store and more.
This episode was executive produced by Candy Thomas, that's me, and Ashley Raymer Brown.
That's me.
It was researched and written by Candy Thomas and edited by Ashley Raymer Brown.
A special thank you to Josh Martin, who wrote, composed, and performed the Scandal Water theme and other music, Matt C. Adams, who created the artwork, and Joshua Reith, who designed our website and provides ongoing technical support.
As a reminder, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes. The thoughts and opinions of the host during each episode of Scandal Water are their own and do not reflect the opinions of any future guests, advertisers, or clearly professional psychologists. Thanks for listening. Hello, Ashley.
Hello.
We're back to address another Western this week.
Yes, we are.
And guess what?
What?
Sorry. What?
What?
All right.